It's like a little surprise every time we look at this camera. I'm like, what are we getting this time? So the first 2 hours, people out on the beach, the flag is blowing. You've got some umbrellas up there. Last hour it was raining in Delray Beach, and now the rain has moved out, but we've still got the dark clouds, and I would expect maybe a little bit of rain moving through once again before all is said and done. Maybe if you're done on the beach, you head to Atlantic Avenue, or the avenue there in Delray Beach, maybe get some tacos and guac. Can you tell it's almost dinner time? Because I think I've been talking about that for 2 hours. So we've got that possibility for more rain, heavy rain at times across South Florida. Now, when you look at this, I feel like this could be a shrug, right? Because we've got tropical downpours still to come through. Well, that's an arrow. That's not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Through Wednesday, you can see my little squiggle here, 1 to 2 inches across South Florida. This is so not going to be the full story. You are going to get some heavy rain at times that's going to have impressive rainfall rates, and you're going to see way more than that before all is said and done. So here's this afternoon, that rain continuing to feed across that 95 corridor. You've got that possibility for heavy rain in Naples as well. So we're still dealing with some heavy rain at times. Now look what happens on Friday. Rounds of rain and storms once again. 2, that's what we're dealing with. And then this plume of tropical moisture across South Florida. So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where we have that risk for flash flooding. If there is a street that you know that floods really easily, you're probably not going to want to be in it on it in Miami for this weekend when we're getting this surge of tropical moisture. High pressure steers this into the Gulf as well. You can see our plume of moisture here hanging out in the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to continue traveling westward. What's happening is this disturbance is going to interact with the bath water. We're talking about really, really hot water temperatures in the Gulf that have yet to be untapped into. So we'll have to watch this for tropical development as it pushes westward. The National Hurricane Center is watching this, giving it currently a low chance for development over the next 7 days, somewhere here in the Gulf. But you can see here anywhere from the Texas coast up through Louisiana, we're watching for that plume of tropical moisture as we head through the early part of next week. This is what the European model is thinking in terms of the possibility of tropical development, about a 50% chance here or there. Something we'll certainly watch very closely. Regardless, it's going to bring us some rain. And I think that's a phrase we're going to be saying about the tropical weather a lot. Regardless of what it is, same with Hilary, it's going to bring us quite a bit of rain.
It definitely is. That's really going to be the main thing that we're going to watch with this for sure with Hilary is how much rain comes into Southern California, how much comes to some of these desert areas that don't get any rain in the month of August.
Exactly.
This is a very out-of-season event to happen for them. 105-mile-per-hour winds is what we're dealing with right now. The next advisory is going to come in any second. If we get that, we'll go ahead and pass it along to you. Category 2, likely going to become a Category 3 here this afternoon, 500 miles outside of Cabo San Lucas here. So what's the flight plan for the hurricane hunters? They're going to do 2 flights tomorrow, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. And so hopefully we get a really good take on what's happening with this as they fly their recon missions within this. We'll get a really good feel for what the winds are. Right now, they're satellite estimated. Friday morning, 130-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane, should maintain that through Saturday, coming down just ever so slightly Saturday evening, and by Sunday morning, looking at a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane here, potentially affecting Baja California, then going north from there into Southern California. There's an eye that's formed on this, very annular, circular look to it now. It's well formed. It's gone through rapid intensification here. Yesterday at this time, winds were 40 miles an hour. Now they're 105. There's some dry air north of this, and eventually that becomes a player and may aid in help weakening this somewhat. But as of right now, it is on its own. It is just doing what it wants at this point. So where's this going? Because high pressure is going to push its way east, that won't block Hilary and push it farther west. It's actually going to now allow the hurricane to come northbound. A little unusual for it to come in this direction, but Southern California, here we go. Last time we had a landfalling tropical system, 84 years ago, a very rare occurrence for tropical systems to come in California. The steering patterns almost always take them westbound. But by Monday morning, we're looking at 60-mile-per-hour winds potentially here. It'll be raining cats and dogs for us here, and very dangerous rainfall rates could be happening with this as the winds and the rain combine to make a really dangerous weather event for us. We might see in San Diego upwards of maybe a 50% odds of tropical storm force winds, but again, I don't think winds are going to be the biggest factor that we see with this. It will be the rain. by Saturday evening, we're going to have tropical storm force winds arrive if it holds together to that. But ultimately, here's the forecast you're interested in. Really heavy rain from the European model as well as the GFS model. Dangerous flash flooding, life-threatening flash flooding could be on the way. More storm coverage coming up next on Storm Center. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
This is Storm Center, and nearly 35 million people inside the cone. Impressive Hurricane Hilary as it heads towards San Diego and Los Angeles. Millions more outside of the cone need to pay attention, including those in Las Vegas. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren along with meteorologist Chris Bruin.
Yeah, a lot going on. Reno even. I mean, we got to watch that moisture go all the way up into the northern Rockies. A big deal, and it's all thanks to Hurricane Hilary. Boy, is it strengthening to the latest advisories out. Still a Category 2 on its way to becoming a major hurricane. It's already rapidly intensified and expected to get even stronger in the next 24 hours.
Also watching new images coming in from the disastrous wildfire in Hawaii as people are coping by helping each other.
We're going to start with storms forming, though, in the Ohio River Valley and targeting some big cities tonight. So there's a lot to cover. Meteorologist Jackie Jarris standing by on the radar this evening.
Good evening, guys. Yeah, we do have a lot going on here tonight. We've got storms in several parts of the country that we're tracking from Florida into the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes. And as we look at our breaking weather alert system, of course, we've got the latest on the tropical advisories with Hurricane Hilary out there, nearly a major hurricane. That should happen later on before the day is done. But let's get you started with those storms that are firing up now across parts of the Ohio Valley, through Ohio, through parts of Indiana, and on up here into parts of Michigan. Now, we do have some air mass thunderstorms out ahead of the main line, and it's a fairly narrow line, but notice a second one trying to develop. None of these storms are severe right now, but a few will likely reach severe limits. So be prepared and know that a couple of warnings could get issued, and the red areas highlighting where that could be happening here yet this afternoon and into tonight. So all these storms are going to be tracking and moving off towards the west, heading into places like Cleveland, into Columbus, Pittsburgh. This could be happening around the midnight hour for tonight, and then some heavy downpours and gusty winds can be expected by very early tomorrow morning along parts of the I-95 corridor and on up towards the Capital District into New York and even into Burlington. Now, we're also tracking storms here across parts of Florida. We've had really heavy rain, several inches into parts of South Florida already. A few of these storms have reached severe limits and even produced some hail up into West Palm. That severe thunderstorm warning was allowed to expire at the top of the hour. Notice we still have a few flood advisories in effect, but only about 15 minutes left on that one for West Miami. So hopefully conditions are improving there, and you can see the worst of the heaviest rain now over towards North Miami and working its way over towards the coast and eventually out over some of those open waters. So some active weather here happening across parts of the South as well as into the Midwest. But we want to bring in the Chris and Chris again and talk a little bit more about Hilary. And we're going to dig into some of the details and some of these impacts because, guys, this is really unusual. We've only had one other tropical storm make landfall in the state of California. So we are going to be talking about things that people have really never experienced before.
Yeah, a lot of Californians. What's going to happen this weekend is something that we really don't have a good idea as to compare it to past storms because it's just we haven't had a setup like this. It's very unusual. It's very rare.
And we've seen remnants, though.
Oh, yeah, we get that all the time.
And the problems that come with those. There was Kay last year, and also in the late 70s, there was a lot of very heavy rain with the remnants of a system. I believe it was Doreen at the time. But, yeah, just to tell you, there's not a lot of comparison.
To get a track like this, too, to take it due north almost, up through California, Nevada, the Great Basin, even getting into eastern Oregon, it's unusual, but it has a lot to do with the setup, which we'll talk about here shortly. But rain, for sure, is going to be the biggest impact.
And so notice where the heavy rain is predicted to be right now, where areas could see as much as 3 to 5 inches. I just want to give you a heads up. Today is just Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So don't get too deep into the details of this at this point because that will become clear with time. So a little bit shift west, a little bit of shift to the right could mean a very big difference as to who ends up with some of those heaviest rainfall amounts. But certainly the mountains into this region will be a big player with that too.
For sure.
So let's get into the latest with Chris. You're going to talk a little bit more about the here and now.
Right, and where it possibly could be going as well. So, of course, a lot we got to figure out. What it is now, we start there, but also where's it going, when's it going to get there, and how bad is it going to be when it does. First, what it is right now, 110 mile per hour Category 2, 1 mile per hour away from being a major Category 3. A major hurricane is a 3, 4, or 5, only goes up to 5. But right now, this is an impressive hurricane here. So with that in mind, tropical storm warnings posted. These are also subject to change as the system gets closer. Could end up being hurricane warnings. But for Baja here, including Cabo San Lucas, tropical storm warning. This already an impressive feature here. Pretty symmetrical. Again, when you look at tropical systems, the more symmetrical, or the more, I hate to say it, but more beautiful they look, oftentimes the more dangerous they are. It really just shows that they've organized. And it is expected to organize into a category, or strengthen, I should say, into a Category 4 hurricane by this weekend. But then as it moves up, much colder waters interacting with land, and it will be weakening. However, cannot rule out the potential for some tropical storm force winds in Southern California. Strong storm here, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the GFS model showing it going right along Baja. And also the European forecast, similar story, similar place, showing a big storm here this weekend. Now let's watch the GFS. If this ends up being exactly what happens, it's going to be a stormy time and very heavy rain here in Los Angeles, San Diego. However, we look at the European, not as intense. So it is likely to see the wind. We are likely to see the winds go down, but what's going to be very difficult to escape is going to be, in some shape, size, fashion, or another, the rain. Wind's still a wild card.
Right.
The mountains, passes, and canyons more likely. Could see 30 to 50 mile an hour winds. Wouldn't rule that out yet. But that heavy rain, it looks like a lock for somebody.
Right. And the wind, I do think, will be a player. And something to think about, too, a lot of the predictions are showing that this will likely become subtropical or post-tropical as it heads towards California. And we don't want people to focus in on wording like that, because regardless, it's still going to have all those impacts. In fact, I was reading the discussion from the National Weather Service, I think out of the San Diego office, talking about how the wind impacts could almost be like a wet Santa Ana event, to think about it like that.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be coming in from the east. It's going to be pushing down the mountains. We're going to have that big pressure gradient between our low offshore and that high, which is really the high that's driving all the heat, too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's steering this thing and how that's going to change.
So the track is very confident we're going to have impacts here in the southwest U.S. and across Southern California, but even heading north of there. And it's all because of that ridge of high pressure, which is getting its act together over the next couple of days. And that's what's going to drive this up towards the north. And there's a second player, a cutoff low coming off the coast of Northern California, which is going to help kind of scoop it up and get it out of here. So it'll be a short-lived event. We're talking late Sunday through Monday being the primary impacts. But until it gets to the cooler water, right now it's in a very favorable spot to intensify. Everything's going for it. It has room to breathe, it's got warm ocean temperatures, and it's got a very favorable environment with the little wind shear. So this is expected to hit major hurricane status, perhaps high-end Cat 4, Cat 5. This is all before it ever gets to California. So there's a look at where we may look at. Now, obviously, the stronger it gets, the stronger intensity it has before it actually weakens. So if it does get towards that higher end Cat 4, maybe even Cat 5, we'll see what happens over the next 48 hours. Then it may be a bit stronger as it moves towards the coast. But does it make a landfall in Baja California and then kind of get torn up by the mountains a little bit? The fact that it's moving so quickly, the impacts are there. The rain's going to be the same regardless. Winds could be a bit stronger if it stays just off the coast, but we're going to have high winds, especially when you compress that topography and the pressure gradient. So it becomes a tropical system changing into a different setup as it moves up into the Great Basin. Heavy rain, though, flooding, all going to be our biggest threat. The coastal areas where you have the heaviest population, that is something we're going to have to watch. The desert areas is where we may have the most significant flash flooding. So all in all, there's a lot to talk about here when we talk about the setup. And more specifically, Jackie, the wind and flood threat. Those are going to be our biggest impacts.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit more specifically the flood threat and what we're expecting. New information coming in from the National Weather Service that they're starting to issue some flood watches now in advance of that moisture coming in from Hurricane Hilary. So here's the latest on the alerts that have just been issued. Some of these have just come in within the last 10-15 minutes. So now pretty much all of Southern California, notice parts of Los Angeles not in the watch yet. I think that will change with time here, most likely, but southern parts of Nevada, including Las Vegas. Look at southern parts of Utah, including Cedar City and Flagstaff, now under the watch, as all of western parts of Arizona, though Phoenix metro area not under the watch just yet. So keep in mind that as we get closer to the event, some of these watches will likely expand. So just because you're not under one now doesn't mean you won't be in the next day or so, because most of these watches don't even go into effect until Saturday morning. Here's a look at the forecast rainfall. This is one model. This is one run of one model, the European model, and it's showing very robust, heavy amounts of rainfall that could exceed a half of a foot in those orange areas that you can see, but widespread areas just outside of San Diego and the Los Angeles County areas where we could see 3 to 5 inches of rainfall, pretty widespread. Now, the GFS actually brings some of those heavier amounts closer towards the coast here and brings less into areas of Arizona, for example. So obviously trying to take that track up in this area. So keep in mind, we're going to have widespread impacts, I think, with widespread rain across an area that hasn't seen a whole heck of a lot. And this is going to be kind of that double whammy in terms of bringing in additional moisture, because we have a couple of different things going on. So this is a model depicting all the moisture associated with Hilary. But I also want you to not just keep that in mind. I want you to watch what happens as that moisture gets drawn in across from the Gulf of Mexico. That's going to start to push in here across the Four Corners region too. So think of it as like a conveyor belt with the low pressure, those winds coming in counterclockwise, and then the high pressure to the east, those winds coming clockwise. So working in both directions to just funnel and direct and aim that moisture into the area that has been so dry over the last month or so. So flooding is a real possibility. We could talk about flash flooding that could be widespread. We could be talking about urban flooding. A lot of the slot canyons, a lot of the burn scar areas, all are going to be at risk. And there is a good chance of this happening. It's possible Saturday into Sunday, but most likely to see the peak of this happening, I think, on Sunday PM and into your Monday. So we'll continue to track the timing of the flood risk, but there are areas that are going to be getting rainfall that they would typically get in an entire calendar year, or even just a month's worth in a day or two. And there you can see quite a bit of ingredients of that rainfall. And one of those places is San Diego, when in August typically gets 1/100th of an inch of rainfall. And we are talking about an inch and a half, maybe more. At least the potential is there for that, Warren.
And Jackie, as we look at the skies here in San Diego, mostly sunny skies. The coast, though, a few clouds, which can be expected. Those temperatures, though, in the lower 70s, just about that perfect kind of San Diego day. But you look at what the European forecast model and the GFS forecast model are showing as possibilities going into this weekend. Really, it's going to be a Sunday, Monday deal. It's going to be anything but a good time here along the coast in Southern California, and especially things looking really bad, potentially inland into the deserts. And our virtual view technology here showing that San Diego, pretty similar scene to what's going on out there. Again, most of the clouds are out over the ocean. Want to get some local San Diego perspective here from a meteorologist, Adam Roser from the National Weather Service in San Diego. First off, Adam, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
We really appreciate it. And Adam, we know that it is rare for California to see tropical systems, pretty much anywhere at any time in the entire state. So let's talk about something that's in recent memory. Let's talk about Kay. Last year, Kay brought some heavy rain to parts of Southern California. How would you compare Kay to what is possible or expected with Hilary?
Right. So yeah, if we remember, Kay kind of took a similar track, but then steered off to the west here. So Hilary looks a bit different here coming into, our coastline area, Baja California. So, no two storms are alike, no impacts, may be different here. So we're definitely looking at, the wind and rain threat with this. This one looks to be closer, coming closer to home. So we'll have to be taking a look at the forecast as we go toward the coming days.
We're talking a lot about the potential for some heavy rain. What are your thoughts on perhaps mudslides and landslides?
Yeah, so taking a look at that, we do have, recent burn scars over the years from fires in Southern California. So that is definitely a possibility, as you all have been mentioning there. Heavy rain is expected across our mountains and, mountain desert slopes. So those will definitely be a possibility. Those mountain roads could definitely be impacted by flooding and different debris flows and different things like that. So we will definitely be watching that as well.
Either from a meteorological standpoint or an impact standpoint, what do you think is the biggest wild card, the biggest unknown with Hilary?
Yeah, so even though we're starting to come up, in a couple days out here, that her track is still a bit uncertain at this time. If we get kind of that more inland track over Baja, we could see more, heavier rains for our mountains and deserts. If we do a more coastal track, more to the west, we may see some more rain and even some higher wind conditions for our coastal areas. So still kind of a bit up in the air, but we just want to make sure everyone is safe and monitoring those impacts.
All right, meteorologist Adam Roser from the National Weather Service in San Diego, we thank you for your time. Still a lot to learn about Hilary.
Summer won't last forever, but during Toyota's
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another day in paradise.
It's treasure hunting time, baby!
What are the chances you finding it?
There's always a chance.
Look at this! It's so beautiful! I got all kinds of good stuff!
Ready to rock and roll now.
Alright, we got gold! We got gold! This is like we're in an underwater coliseum right now. Wow, this is already so beautiful, man. This is crazy.
Watch Search Party with me, Brandon Jordan, Sunday at 9, 8 Central on the Weather Channel.
Well, this is Storm Center. Tropics really heating up, especially here in the Pacific. And yes, that is the cone going across a lot of California, Nevada, even into Oregon and touching Idaho. Notice the winds, though. Hilary expected to weaken considerably in terms of the winds, but still the potential for some heavy rain once this system gets up into Southern California could have some very serious impacts. So absolutely a lot to watch with what Hurricane Hilary ultimately does to the states and to Mexico along the way. But right now, parts of the United States in some showers and some thunderstorms. Let's go to meteorologist Jackie Jarris right now, who's on the radar.
Hey, Chris, and good evening, everybody. We are tracking storms right now across parts of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. And we've got a few storms that are developing out ahead of that main line that are in parts of Pennsylvania, into New York, even into Vermont and New Hampshire. This is the main line that we're tracking, but notice the secondary one, which has developed. And we even have a severe thunderstorm warning on that one into northern parts of Indiana. That includes parts of Whitley County until 6 o'clock. Radar indicating we're likely getting some damaging winds with this, but I wouldn't rule out a little bit of hail as well. We've got the gusty winds with that outflow boundary being depicted there on Doppler radar too. So that's heading down towards the south and east. This should stay just outside of Fort Wayne and likely head across the Interstate 69 corridor. Now, as for Cleveland, get ready to get wet. That wet weather is moving in on the west side of town. Notice a lot of lightning into western parts of Lake Erie, and then some heftier thunderstorms working their way around Columbus. Notice the bolt from the blue. It's not raining right there, but lightning is striking out away from where the main thunderstorm is. So when thunder roars, always remember to go indoors. Bruin?
Well, turning our attention now to the deadly wildfires in Hawaii. Signs of recovery are emerging with public schools across Maui reopening, as well as traffic into Lahaina. Governor Josh Green is vowing to prevent land grabs during this time. He's announcing details on a moratorium by tomorrow. Since flames consumed much of Lahaina just over a week ago, locals have feared that a rebuilt town could become even more oriented towards wealthy visitors. Chris.
What we know so far this hour, the death toll for the Hawaii wildfires is now 111 people. The number for those missing or unaccounted for is around 1,000. There's limited access to burned areas because of chemicals and toxins. 40% of the burned areas have been searched so far. FEMA has sent more than 190 search and rescue team members. They also have 492 employees deployed to assist Hawaii residents.
People throughout Hawaii are doing all they can to help their neighbors affected by wildfires. Let's listen as volunteers explain in their own words.
I'm doing this because there is tainted water and a lack of fuel in the burned out area of Lahaina.
Words can't really describe what I'm feeling. My heart doesn't ache for my loss of possession. My heart aches for my community. People that lost family members, friends. A lot of people are still stuck without power, without food, without water, without provisions. 2 months. It's been really hard for people to get over there to bring supplies. God bless you.
Strength in numbers and lots of friends donating huge amounts of money and resources.
Well, we've got some rain coming to parts of Hawaii, and that rain will be a relief because it has been still very dry and very gusty. We've got a tropical depression, Greg, that's moving south of the islands right now. That is really not a concern at all. It's the remnants or the post-tropical system here, Fernanda, that's going to be moving in and bringing in the chance of rainfall. So this should be pushing in the next couple of days. It's not a ton of rain, but it's some, and we'll take it, especially onto the eastward sides of the islands. The rain may be heaviest, believe it or not, at the higher elevations here into Maui. That's what the European model is showing, but notice the USGFS is bringing less rainfall overall across the region, and most of the rain would be a little bit more moderate over parts of the Big Island. Gusty winds have been persistent off and on. Notice Honolulu at 25-mile-per-hour gusts. We were seeing gusts a couple of hours ago, still in the 30-mile-per-hour range there on Maui. Notice the gusty winds remaining in the forecast with dry conditions, plenty of sunshine, so things remaining on the dry side, and the drought, of course, continuing here as well. It is severe, especially on south and west facing shores there into Maui. So rain on the way, just not too much is what we need. Welcome back to Storm Center, everybody. We are tracking Hurricane Hilary and what we might be expecting on the west coast or southwestern coast of the United States. Hilary is a Category 2 storm with winds of 110 miles per hour, but nearly Category 3 strength. So Category 3 is what we call a major hurricane. It's been rapidly intensifying and continuing to move west-northwest, but more of a pull towards the north is expected with time. And notice places like San Diego, Los Angeles, Reno, all in the cone down the line. So this is going to be bringing very heavy rain, the risk of flooding, perhaps some gusty winds to the southwestern U.S. So I want to bring in meteorologist Chris Warren and Chris Bruin for the latest, and let's talk about Hilary and all these impacts we're expecting going forward, guys.
First off, I don't remember seeing Oregon in a cone.
No, Oregon,
ever.
Reno, Lake Tahoe. I mean, you just don't think of tropical systems in this part of the country.
No, I lived in Bend, Oregon for a number of years, and that's at 3,000 feet. It's a ski town.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's pretty wild stuff. Now, you might get some clouds and a little bit of moisture out of it there, but that's the direction it's going.
You know, but getting tropical rain in a tropical environment is one thing, like in the Caribbean and across the southeast and parts of Florida. Getting tropical rain in a desert or Mediterranean type of environment, that's a whole different ballgame.
Totally. And already here, this is a whole different kind of storm from what it was just 2 days ago, Chris.
I mean, yesterday it was still tropical. It was formed yesterday. Tropical
storm. It was just a mess of clouds 2 days ago, and now look at the eye on that thing as it is moving to the north. Now, there's still a lot we got to work out with this, right? This potentially could get up to a major hurricane, as Jackie just mentioned. However, it will not be a hurricane when it gets to California. It's probably not going to be even a tropical storm, but it will bring some serious rainfall.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a huge threat, especially given how, you know, this is a lot of these areas are desert. This is our dry season, so the ground's really parched. When you're talking that much rain, it's moving quickly. So you're getting a lot of rain in a very, very short period of time. We can't handle it. And the runoff, the terrain here, you get mountains that, you know, we're talking the risk for mudslides, flash floods, areas that have been burned recently, recent forests that have been burned, that 40-mile-per-hour winds come, knocking down trees. There will be that risk for power outages, but again, it's mainly that threat for heavy rain. And there's a lot of consensus with both of the model guidance, but then they vary in the details as it gets closer to California. I mean, but a difference of 50 miles is going to make a lot of difference for LA versus Palm Springs.
Right. When it's west of Cabo, both having a strong hurricane here. Still, still strong. And then potentially
wants to skirt right up the coast.
But it's still possible it could go over land, which
which the other model is showing. Right. Yeah, and you'll see that with the European. Either way, though, the rain's all on the east side. You get that onshore flow. So where those mountains line up, you get that upslope, and it really. The next, how many hours away are we? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, really, is going to be crunch time, and all of this kind of starts on Saturday.
All right, so again, just want to reiterate the fact that by the time we're watching this get into California, we're talking about rain, right? Over the next few days, we're going to be making a big deal, because it is a big deal, of a big hurricane, but it's going to change a lot by the time it gets to California. What I don't think is going to change too much is the fact there's going to be a lot of rain.
Right.
It's just who gets how much is what still remains to be seen. We do have some rain right now that we're watching.
We do.
Some thunderstorms.
Not anything that we think is going to cause too much of a trouble when it comes to flooding, at least not across parts of the Great Lakes or Midwest. But we're watching Florida, where we have had some rising water and some urban flooding in Miami-Dade counties. Here's a look at the active radar right now, and we're watching a couple of different lines. This is with the frontal boundary that's associated with low pressure that's up in Canada right now. So this is bringing in some rain, thunderstorms in some cases. A few of those storms are going to reach severe limits. That's what's happening right now in Indiana, just outside of Fort Wayne. Sydney, as well as into South Whitley County, County, under a severe thunderstorm warning. We do have some hail likely with that storm. Could be up to the size of quarters. Notice the little hail signature that we're seeing there just south of Highway 30. That's where the large hail may be, greater than an inch in diameter. So hopefully you got the cars in the garage. Now, most of these storms won't reach severe limits, but they're going to produce some rain and they're going to produce a lot of lightning. So that's going to be a concern. And this will hold together as it works eastward with time here tonight. So notice by about 11 o'clock, places like Buffalo and Pittsburgh getting in on the action. And the first line will be working its way towards Binghamton into Oswego. This will be heading over towards New York, Philadelphia, Albany, as well as into Burlington overnight tonight and affect the morning commute in some of the big areas on I-95.
Who says you?
Welcome back into Storm Center. We're tracking Hurricane Hilary here in the eastern Pacific off the coast of Mexico, moving to the west-northwest, about to make a turn. And you can see it's over some very warm waters until it gets farther north. And that's where things will then start to weaken. But we do expect the potential here of a major hurricane within the next 48 hours. And then beyond that, rapidly weakening before bringing in some extremely heavy rainfall and a very heightened risk of flash flooding from California into the Great Basin and across parts of the desert Southwest. We're going to break more of this down in detail and specific impacts and, of course, the latest updates here all evening on Storm Center, so stick around for that. But a lot of other things that we've been talking about. It's back to school season for many, and kids are headed back to school, and there's still several storms that happen this time of the year. And so we wanted to get a look at what tips you may have for back to school and going and dealing with storms.
Okay, well, you might remember the EF5 tornado that decimated the town 10 years ago. 24 people were killed, and so many others lost their homes, businesses, and their schools. And that includes what you see here of Tower Plaza's elementary school. Now, the road to recovery for this community has been years in the making.
And we return to Moore, Oklahoma, a year after the tornado to see the progress made with Plaza Towers Elementary. 7 people died inside that school during the storm. And now joining us to talk about tornado safe rooms with the district is Dr. Robert Romines.
He's a superintendent for Moore Public Schools. I want to thank you so much for being with us here today. Of course, the school year is about to start, and safety of the children is on the top of people's minds. I know you've learned a lot, but you've had some challenges along the way since that day. Tell us how things have changed when it comes to safety at your school for storms.
A lot of things have changed in regards to our safe rooms. We've got 35 sites, and we were fortunate, shortly after the 2013 tornado, 2015, we put a bond issue in front of our community, and we wanted to place a safe room in every one of our sites. And so we've been able to accomplish that, and that has been a huge sigh of relief for our families in this community, especially with everything that we've been through. Fortunately, we've not had to use those safe rooms as we would have used back in 2013, but they are there and they're usable spaces. So you might have a set of kindergartners or a wing of kindergartners working in classrooms during the school day and not even know that they're actually in a safe space or a safe room.
So do they look just like regular, if I'm hearing you correctly, they just look like regular classrooms, is that right?
That is correct. So we've got classroom space, we've got media centers, we've got locker rooms in some of our gymnasiums. When we planned that bond issue, we're a growing school district, and so we needed classroom space. So when we did that, we implemented the safe structures within actual usable space.
So in addition to being concerned about storms, heat is another big weather concern for you there in Oklahoma. We've had so many days with alerts in effect. I imagine you have to alter recess, or what do you do to keep the kids safe in those conditions?
We do. Unfortunately, again, part of our most recent bond issue, we had an air conditioning or HVAC proposition on our bond issue for our gymnasiums and those types of things. So our indoor facilities are now in the process of getting AC. We do have to make adjustments for playground. As much as we want our children to be out and about and running on the playgrounds and getting some of that energy out, we've got to take into consideration the safety component as far as the heat. So we do have to make adjustments in regards to indoor recess and those types of things.
Is there a lesson you would like to, or maybe you have already, like to share with other school districts across the U.S.?
Well, obviously the biggest one is the Storm Shelter Initiative. And, if you've got supportive communities and tornadoes are a thing that you deal with, obviously that is something that we learned that, tornadoes can happen at any point in time during the day. We weren't used to tornadoes coming through during the school day. Usually they came through at early evening hours and late hours. But we learned that, nature has its own course and path. And so just be prepared, for an event like that during the school day.
And parents, be patient as well when things like recess gets changed or kids have to stay at school because it's not safe for parents to come and pick them up as well. We really appreciate your time, your words of advice for other schools across the country, and wishing you and the kids the best and safety this school year. That's Dr. Robert Romines. He's the superintendent for Moore Public Schools in Oklahoma. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
And so with that, here's a look at tomorrow. Another, Friday, end of week, ready for the weekend for the kids. Think about staying safe, getting off and on the school bus in the Northeast, and a few showers in the Southwest. This is Storm Center, and this is the cone for Hilary, expected to become a major hurricane here. That is the forecast. You can see right here already rapidly intensifying overnight. By tomorrow afternoon, it is looking to be a Category 4 hurricane. Again, the threats getting up to Southern California eventually, likely not so much the wind. While there certainly could be a wind component to this, it does look like heavy rain is the biggest concern at this point for Southern California. But boy, if you have plans in Baja, or if you know anybody there, it could be a really nasty situation. And a tropical threat we know on the West Coast is extremely rare here in the United States. In fact, this is the first time Los Angeles has been in the forecast cone since the Hurricane Center started using the cone in 2002. For a little insight on that and what's behind this rare tropical threat, let's go to storm specialist Carl Parker.
It is not a common occurrence to get a tropical cyclone in Southern California, and that has everything to do with what's going on with ocean temperatures off of California. This time of the year, water temperatures are in the 60s, not nearly warm enough to maintain a tropical cyclone with that colder water coming down along the coast. However, it's much, much warmer farther south along the west coast of Mexico. So if you get a really strong storm that comes up along the west coast of Mexico and then is pulled northward, it can very easily be that even though it's weakening, it's still strong enough to produce wind and heavy rain. But again, it's not a common occurrence. And in fact, the only time that we have seen hurricane force winds in Southern California in recorded history is going back 165 years, 1858, when a hurricane was just offshore relative to San Diego, and it did cause a fair amount of wind damage. Now, what's amazing about this is that at the time there were only about 4,300 people in San Diego County. And in fact, when you look at a photograph of downtown Los Angeles from 11 years later, 1869, look at that. That is downtown Los Angeles. And obviously things have changed dramatically. It is one of the largest metro areas in the country. About 20 million people live there. So if we saw a similar storm today, it would likely cause hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Now, the thing that has us worried going forward is that water temperatures are getting warmer every year, which means it's more possible for storms to stay strong as they move up and along the coast. And so we may see more of a threat from heavy rain and even some wind coming into Southern California in coming years. Back to you.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch this whole thing unfold. You know, we don't have a lot to compare this to, right? We had a tropical storm in 1939 that made landfall in California. That's all we've got to go on pretty much, other than what models bring us and, of course, what science tells us as well. But it's very different than a tropical system that would be developing and making landfall, say, in the Gulf or on the east coast of the U.S.
We can't rule out that we're going to have tropical storm force winds. That can't be ruled out yet.
Right.
And we probably will in the higher elevations.
At least gusts.
Yeah, we'll have gusts, but sustained winds.
And the chance it's still a tropical storm as strong as it's forecast to get?
Yeah, there's a chance it skirts the coast and then possibly makes a landfall in California, which is very rare to do. There's the latest on Hurricane Hilary as of the 3 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, 110 miles per hour. But look at how this has strengthened. I mean, since this morning, we were at 50 miles per hour. Yeah. And now we've over doubled that in less than 24 hours. And we're going to keep going. Yeah. There's a chance this may get high in Cat 4, high in Cat 5. Obviously well before California, but within the next 24 to 48 hours.
So there are a lot of different steering elements that come into play. And of course, when a storm is making somewhat of a turn, that can be a little bit of a challenge in predicting exactly where it's going to be coming inland. And a little bit of a wiggle to the left or a little bit of a wiggle to the right could have some serious impacts that would be very different than maybe what you would have gotten in the other situation in places like San Diego into Los Angeles. Everybody east of there, say Las Vegas into Phoenix into Flagstaff, the only difference for you would be maybe how much you get in terms of rain, right? Everybody else is going to have pretty definite impacts.
But it could shift even more east and then brings up higher impacts to some of the more inland places like Las Vegas and parts of Arizona.
This map, I think, does a really good job of showing just the fact that the waters really do play a big role in weakening a storm.
As well as the mountains, because there's a lot of mountains, and that will interfere with the circulation as well from Baja California to the state.
This is a large storm. Already, this is a very large storm, so far-reaching impacts from the coast to the Four Corners.
Have fun.
More than 36 million people inside the cone of what is a very impressive hurricane as it heads towards San Diego and Los Angeles. Millions more outside of the cone need to stay alert and pay attention to the forecast in the coming days. That includes Las Vegas.
Yeah, Las Vegas, Reno, parts of Arizona. We got to watch this closely because little shifts can mean all the difference.
This is Storm Center. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren.
And I'm meteorologist Chris Bruin. Take a look at Hurricane Hilary right now. We're going to pull it up for you here on the floor. And the satellite showing you some enhanced colors, meaning strengthening is taking place right now. And look at how well defined that eye is now.
Look at that thing.
Look at it. On its way to become a major hurricane.
It is over some very warm waters right now. It is intensifying, a very favorable environment now for these storms. Also, still getting some new pictures in from this disastrous wildfire in Hawaii as people are coping the best they can, really by helping each other.
So a lot to cover from Hawaii to California and the desert Southwest. We've also got storms that we've been tracking, and we want to get straight to meteorologist Jack Jarris back with us tonight, monitoring all of the coverage, including storms right now.
Yeah, let's start out with what's happening with the active weather. We've got a bunch of warnings out there, some for flash flooding, some for severe storms that are producing damaging winds, and some large hail. So as we look at our BREWS, our breaking weather alert system, severe thunderstorm warning in Utah County, Utah. We just had some really gusty winds that could have caused a little damage there in Salt Lake City. That warning was just allowed to expire, however, but now Utah County in on it. Flash flooding in parts of Idaho, and then we also have some warnings in the Ohio Valley. This is the main storm system that we're tracking at this hour right now. I want to show you the radar bringing lines of showers and thunderstorms from parts of Michigan into parts of Ontario, into Ohio, as well as into Indiana. And then there's a secondary line right there back behind it, and those storms did produce a little bit hail earlier in northern parts of Indiana. So going forward for tonight, we're going to have a couple of what I would call maybe renegade rainstorms out ahead of the main area, and then we'll have these two lines that we'll need to track that should hold together and track from the west towards the east. This will be moving towards places like Buffalo, into Pittsburgh, even into the Charleston area later on this evening, say about bedtime or so, 10, 11, 12 o'clock, and look at how that line then just this takes over and works its way through eastern Pennsylvania on up into upstate New York. This is 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, and things could be dicey in New York City up towards Albany, even into Burlington, Vermont. A few of the storms could produce some damaging winds, so be aware of that. And then there's Florida. So Florida has been pretty dicey this afternoon, especially in south parts of the state where we've had really heavy rainfall. 1 to 4 inches has come down in a few parts of southeast Florida. We had a couple of warnings earlier, including you in West Palm, where some good hail was coming down and bouncing off the street there and the pavement. Now we've got thunderstorms, none that are severe, but nothing to sneeze at here. There's a lot of lightning, very heavy rain. Notice Orlando and Kissimmee doing okay right now, but we'll keep an eye on you with the rain coming in from the west. But notice up here towards the Big Bend and north of Leesburg, right along Interstate 75, that's where the rain's a little heavier and we're getting more frequent lightning. Now, West Palm is looking better than you did earlier. You can see a lot of the action is pulled offshore, but we still have some clustering of thunderstorms right along Alligator Alley there outside of Naples. And then the flood advisories that were in effect in Miami-Dade County, those have been allowed to expire. So that's some good news, but we did have some really good rain here on the order of 2 to 3 inches easy. And look at that, radar even estimating more than 4 inches near Hialeah. So just be prepared that there has been a little bit of flooding. It's that type of an environment where our storms are going to bring very heavy rain and not a lot of movement. That said, we don't think this will be too widespread, and a lot of the worst of those storms have worked offshore. Honestly, I'd be most concerned about that clustering on the west side of Alligator Alley. Well, we want to get you caught up, and we want to dive a little bit deeper right now into what we can expect coming with Hurricane Hilary. We've got meteorologist Chris Bruin and Chris Warren who are here with me right now. And let's break this down, guys, I think category by category in terms of, what this is doing now, where it's going to be going, what the flood risks are, what the wind risks might be, and what's all making this happen, I think, as well. So this is an unusual thing that's only really happened maybe once before.
Yeah, a lot of people in the path, they're not used to this, that do they know how to prepare? Right. I would prepare for flooding, which they have seen in the past. You get these in the winter system. Hopefully. This is the peak of fire season for the Southwest. This is the dry season, the driest month on average for San Diego, many spots in California. And here we go with one of our wettest events that we get in years.
Yeah, some of these areas could get, more than a year's worth.
Yeah.
Certainly more than a month's worth of rain. And this is the dry season typically as we're getting into that. So, Chris, let's start out with what's happening right now with Hilary, because this thing is really ramped up today.
Now, we know, for certain it's not going to be a hurricane when it gets to California. And we're going to be talking a lot about how strong it's going to get. And let's remember, the bigger it gets, the farther it has to go, the further it has to go to become weaker, right? So it has the opportunity to have more momentum as it goes to the north. So it's not all academic. And if you know anybody that lives in Mexico or plans to be in Mexico, or anybody that may happen to somehow be watching us from Mexico, likely to have some big impacts as well in Cabo and even inland a little ways. 111 makes it a Category 3. So you are, very close. Would not be surprised at all within the next, hour or two, hour and a half or so, it could be up to a Category 3. We'll see. But yeah, this is a big one right here. And watches and warnings for tropical storm conditions already up. That could change as the storm continues to go up to the north. This is impressive looking here on the visible satellite. You take a look at the symmetry of it. So, God, I wish this was right here, right? So you can really just kind of imagine you have a line going this way, and each little quadrant doesn't look too different. So it has a very symmetrical look, and it's these more organized systems that tend to be stronger. It's a sign of its strength, essentially. So continuing to strengthen into the weekend. Then as it goes over cooler waters, it will weaken considerably. And then high end perhaps could get up to a tropical, or could stay as a tropical storm as it gets into California. But it looks right now that it will be significantly weakening. But again, still gusty winds. We'll work out those details. But the cone, it could go inland, which will weaken even more, or out to sea, which could keep it stronger a little bit longer. And we'll see that scenario right here with the GFS. These tight lines show us a very strong and windy storm. The European shows a similar story here Saturday at 6. Now the GFS, as it goes up, staying offshore, staying stronger, Monday at 6 o'clock in the morning. If this plays out, it will be a mess. Very heavy rain, strong gusty winds as well. But then there's the European forecast, which shows a very wet mess, gusty, but not as strong in terms of winds. And we don't want to completely forget about it once it gets up into Oregon and Idaho, because it's still going to have a lot of tropical juice with this, too. And even as far north as Oregon and in Washington, Idaho, you get tropical air coming up, you can feel it. What's typically dry, you know the air is different.
By that time, it's going to be kind of getting absorbed, I think, with the jet stream. That could inject some stronger winds with it, too. Got a lot of fires that are burning in Oregon and Washington right now. So maybe it will help them. Maybe it'll fan those winds. We'll see what happens as it gets a little bit closer to that part of the event. But let's talk about what's driving all this, because we've got that big heat dome, and that's kind of shifting a little bit more eastward this week, which means it kind of helps to open up the path to funnel this thing right up into California.
To get it to go that due north is pretty rare. I mean, usually these curve out to sea. Let's walk and show you the pattern that we have here, because that's notable too. The fact that we've got a very powerful hurricane moving up the Baja coast, that happens, but then a lot of times they'll either curve out to sea or they'll fizzle out or move inland. The setup, the path with this is very confident because of that ridge of high pressure, but also a cutoff low. And I'll show you that. Right now in the atmosphere, there's almost none whatsoever wind shear. So this is why we're seeing it strengthen, which is why from a satellite perspective it looks as textbook as you can get when it comes to a hurricane. So very warm waters, no wind shear. This is in a very favorable environment. It does get into much cooler waters starting this weekend. So by the time it gets far enough into northern parts of Mexico, it'll likely be either just offshore or along the coast. That's when we'll start to see weakening. If it moves inland, there's a chance it could make landfall in Mexico, and then that would weaken it because it would be over land and also the mountains. But the moisture is still going north, where the impacts are going to be there. The details, those are the things we have to work out, because it does mean a lot of difference for people in the heavily populated metro areas like LA and San Diego. If it skirts further along shore and moves up through Southern California, that would be our biggest impact for you. If it moves more inland, the deserts would be seeing the worst of the conditions. So there's a lot of things there, but there's that cutoff low that Jackie was pointing out that's going to eventually just like slingshot this right up the west coast into Canada and then back over into the eastern part of North America. So there's a look at the strength. You can see it drops off notably once we lose those cooler waters. And you really need about 80-degree water temperatures. We have that now, well above that, but we're going to get into the upper 60s and low 70s here before long. So that's why we do expect major weakening before California. It's not going to stay a major hurricane, but we will have wind impacts and certainly the rain impacts. And in some cases, that could be devastating and catastrophic, and especially coming off such an active winter. A lot of these reservoirs, Jackie, they're already near full pool. So where does all that excess water go? Could we see dam concerns, with that amount of water coming in so quickly in such a short period of time? For the flood aspects are huge.
Mudslides, debris flows, burn scar areas, all of those things certainly are going to be vulnerable here. So let's talk a little bit more about that flood threat in particular. We've got flood alerts that are now getting launched and being issued for Southern California, for southern parts of Nevada, into southern Utah, and about the western half of Arizona. Notice Phoenix is not in it, but Flagstaff is. These alerts could be expanded or shifted a little bit with time as we're getting a little bit closer to the countdown on this event. And notice that a lot of these don't even go into effect until Saturday morning. So this really gets started, I think, for a lot of us on Saturday. Sunday, most likely the big day, late Sunday and into Monday. That's what we're thinking now, the latest for timing, but that could get nudged a little bit too. So we don't want to worry about the fine details until we get a little bit closer. We want to talk about some of these impacts, and rainfall amounts could be approaching 5, 6, 7, 8 inches. That's a half of a foot of rain in the desert. So you know that is too much rain, certainly over this type of length of time, where some of these areas don't get that much rainfall in an entire calendar year. The models are agreeing on the amount of rain that may get put out, but they're kind of varying a little bit as to exactly where that's going to be. But we feel confident that a high level of moisture is going to be pushing in, and it's not just from Hilary here, right? All that moisture is going to get fed up and pushed into the region, but also coming around that area of high pressure is going to help to enhance that. So we'll actually even be getting some moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico.
As we look at the skies here in San Diego, mostly sunny skies. The coast, though, a few clouds, which can be expected. Those temperatures, though, in the lower 70s, just about that perfect kind of San Diego day. But you look at what the European forecast model and the GFS forecast model are showing as possibilities going into this weekend. Really, it's going to be a Sunday, Monday deal. It's going to be anything but a good time here along the coast in Southern California, and especially things looking really bad, potentially inland into the deserts. And our virtual view technology here showing that San Diego, pretty similar scene to what's going on out there. Again, most of the clouds are out over the ocean. Want to get some local San Diego perspective here from a meteorologist, Adam Roser from the National Weather Service in San Diego. First off, Adam, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you.
We really appreciate it. And Adam, we know that it is rare for California to see tropical systems, pretty much anywhere at any time in the entire state. So let's talk about something that's in recent memory. Let's talk about Kay. Last year, Kay brought some heavy rain to parts of Southern California. How would you compare Kay to what is possible or expected with Hilary?
Right. So, yeah, if we remember, Kay kind of took a similar track, but then steered off to the west here. So Hilary looks a bit different here coming into, our coastline area, Baja California. So, no two storms are alike. No impacts, may be different here. So we're definitely looking at, the wind and rain threat with this. This one looks to be closer, coming closer to home. So we'll have to be taking a look at the forecast as we go toward the coming days.
We're talking a lot about the potential for some heavy rain. What are your thoughts on perhaps mudslides and landslides?
Yeah, so taking a look at that, we do have, recent burn scars over the years from fires in Southern California. So that is definitely a possibility, as you all have been mentioning there. Heavy rain is expected across our mountains and, mountain desert slopes. So those will definitely be a possibility. Those mountain roads could definitely be impacted by flooding and different debris flows and different things like that. So we will definitely be watching that as well.
Either from a meteorological standpoint or an impact standpoint, what do you think is the biggest wild card, the biggest unknown with Hilary?
Yeah, so even though we're starting to come up, in a couple days out here, that her track is still a bit uncertain at this time. If we get kind of that more inland track over Baja, we could see more, heavier rains for our mountains and deserts. If we do a more coastal track, more to the west, we may see some more rain and even some higher wind conditions for our coastal areas. So still kind of a bit up in the air, but we just want to make sure everyone is safe and monitoring those impacts.
All right, meteorologist Adam Roser from the National Weather Service in San Diego, we thank you for your time. Still a lot to learn about Hilary.
How can anyone love a cat?
Responding to a hurricane is way more unpredictable. The divers can get trapped underwater. It's a significant challenge.
When everybody's running for the exit, those are the guys, the firefighters of the marine world.
All of a sudden, we see that the boat is leaning to one side.
If it collapses at that moment, it could be deadly. It's a very high risk and very high reward.
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
We're going to win. We never lose. Deepwater Salvage. All new episodes. Sunday nights, 8/7 Central. Only on the Weather Channel.
Over the deep water of the Pacific is Hurricane Hilary. It will continue to move to the north, eventually weaken to a tropical storm as it approaches California, Nevada, and Oregon in the cone, in the path of whatever remains of Hilary as it moves up here into North America. Flooding does look like a real possibility with this because of the very heavy rain that's expected out of that. The wind still remains to be seen here. So we are looking at a very serious storm on the Pacific side of the U.S. and Mexico. But Chris, not the only thing we're watching.
No, this is obviously center stage because of timing preferences and big impacts here to an area that doesn't typically see it. So big concerns over the weekend and into early next week. And then beyond that, sometimes simultaneously, we got to watch the potential for development here in the Gulf Coast because we don't want this to sneak up on us. So there's a chance this may not develop at all. Right now, we're looking at 30% chance of development. And really, that's over the next 7 days after the weekend. So right now, the system is still well east of Florida. It's going to increase our rain chances in Florida, okay? But because the Gulf of Mexico is so warm, we've got water temperatures well above 85 degrees, 87 degrees, 89, even near 90-degree water temperatures here, especially in the eastern Gulf. That is fuel for tropical development. And the wind shear overall, by the time this area of disturbed weather starts to push over the Gulf of Mexico, is relatively lax. There's not a ton of wind shear, so there is an opportunity for development. The question is there enough moisture, and is there going to be enough development organized to turn into something tropical? This is essentially just looking at spin, not necessarily development, but you see that area, the tropical wave coming through Florida. We don't expect development at all before then. It's just too dry. We got a lot of Saharan dust. After that, it heads into a much favorable environment, and that's where the chances for development will be. So it would be early next week, but the key is if it does develop, we're looking at a 24 to 48 hour window before it would impact the coastline. So that's why we want to continue to monitor the situation because it would be a short-lived event. And you don't want to tune in and find out there's a tropical storm possibly headed your way. So it's one of those things you just want to pay close attention to the forecast. For Florida, we do not expect tropical development. However, we are going to see an increase in rain. We already see that today, and we're just going to continue with those daily thunderstorms. In fact, the risk is a little bit more widespread, so your rain chances are increased, and the rainfall could be even a little bit heavier. But notice the European model definitely wanting to spend something up or try to as it works towards the Texas coast. Again, it's not saying it's going to hit Texas, but it just gives you an idea. The western Gulf of Mexico certainly want to pay close attention, really from New Orleans west. The GFS showing something similar near the Texas coast. So will we see development? There is that possibility. And beneficial rain. Also, this would bring relief to the folks who have been in triple-digit heat here for quite some time. So certainly we'll drop our temperatures back into the 90s, and we could use that rain, especially in the hill country and across much of central Texas. So and all in all, especially if it stays on the weaker side of things, this could be a benefit.
Sure, absolutely. In fact, the lion's share of your rainfall for the summer in a lot of these areas. So you just got to spread that out a little bit to make sure things are okay. We do have tropical downpours that have been hitting parts of Florida today. There you can see some new video just into the Weather Channel showing you South Florida here in the Fort Lauderdale area getting the heavy downpours and the gusty wind. Now, we did have a severe thunderstorm earlier this afternoon. I think this was just before 5 o'clock Eastern time in West Palm, and this one caused quite a bit of damage, actually. 74-mile-per-hour wind gust was clocked here at West Palm Beach near the fire station there, and you can see some huge trees that have been down, causing some damage. No reports of injuries. We'll continue to keep our eye on it, and hopefully that will continue to remain true. But we've had some pretty explosive storms that haven't been moving a whole heck of a lot. We have had some flood reports too in Miami-Dade County. All those alerts have been allowed to expire for the moment, but that's not to say we're not going to get a new one. You can see right there the big explosion of our storms over Alligator Alley. That's really the most intense storm that we're tracking right now. Some of the populated areas, though, may be in line for some of the training of this rain and thunderstorms. That's been the case here in the Big Bend over towards Leesburg. The good news there is notice how the lightning has kind of ticked down quite a bit. So we're seeing less intensity with those storms on the radar. pretty hefty there near Okeechobee, and then down here, as I mentioned, the strongest storm there that could be producing 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts on Alligator Alley to the east of Naples. Also heads up Fort Myers, especially on the east side of town, where you guys are getting hammered with a lot of lightning and heavy downpours. Welcome back to Storm Center as we continue to track Hurricane Hilary in the eastern Pacific. This is a stronger hurricane than what we had earlier today. This has been ramping up very quickly. It's now a Category 2 storm with winds of 110 miles per hour, but nearly, in fact, 1 mile per hour off away from a Category 3 or a major hurricane. Look at the forecast cone. This is not something you would typically see every day. In fact, we've only had one landfalling tropical storm on record in recent history, and that was back in 1939. So we have places like San Diego, Los Angeles, Reno, parts of Oregon in the cone. Chris, this is going to be the big storm to track through the weekend and into next week, and this is affecting areas that just aren't used to these types of conditions necessarily.
This time of year, not used to rain.
Yeah.
Right? Like at all.
That's when they wrote that song, It Never Rains in Southern California. This time of year, probably, I think.
Well, I mean, you get a drop of rain almost anywhere in California, but especially in Southern California. It's a big deal.
It is.
Here in August.
Not just for impacts and commuters, but in the desert.
Of it.
I mean, the amount, a half inch of rainfall in a fast period can cause just catastrophic, impacts.
Look at this thing, though.
This is Hurricane Hilary. Look at it now. Look at the eye. And look at the lightning there and the eye wall. Again, right over the ocean right now, not impacting anybody at the time being. But this is headed to the north and strengthening.
All right, but as a reminder, the storm as it is now, the hurricane as it is now, will not make it in this
No, this is not what we'll see.
This is not what's going to California. Parts of it will be, the moisture associated with it, some of the spin associated with it, but it's not going to be a hurricane moving into California. Now, into Mexico, yes, that certainly is a possibility. Close to a tropical storm, maybe a tropical storm into California, possible, maybe. Yeah. We'll see. Depends on the track, right? The track, the center of whatever's left of Hilary could be out here, could be here, 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 here. And as big as this is, Chris, the rain's going to be all over.
Yeah, and impacts are going to be huge. If it takes a more easterly track, we wouldn't have as big of impacts in Los Angeles, partly because you have descending winds down the mountains, which would dry you out. But you would have more impacts in Las Vegas and east of there. If you have it offshore a little bit, that would be a worser case scenario for the I-5 corridor.
All right, so here's one possible scenario. It's the GFS model. It's the American model. This shows a strong storm going up Baja. The Euro does as well, picking it back up here. Again, this is Sunday into Monday. If this plays out, this is still a pretty decent storm, Chris, moving into California.
The consistency with these runs, too. I mean, this is what we were seeing yesterday and the day before. And so it's really impressive that it's been this consistent now for this many days.
But there's also some consistent disagreement as well.
Yeah, the European shows it moving more quickly and moving inland earlier,
which would be not as windy, but
towards the coastal areas.
But the rain, regardless, looks like it's on the way. So expecting to see some rain in California, possibly flooding rain. Any rain this time of year is unusual. Any time of the year that rain creates flooding in Southern California is also unusual. This has at least, Jackie, the potential for a big event in Southern California.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what are you seeing right now on the radar? We're always tracking the latest storms that are happening right now.
So dry there. They're not having any problems today, that's for sure. Everything's happening across the Great Lakes and into the Ohio Valley. We've got an upper low. The main surface low is actually up into Canada right now, but we're feeling the big impacts in parts of Michigan on into Ohio. And this is working its way into the Northeast. So water vapor doing a good job of showing us that upper trough. And there you can see that piece of energy swinging on through. So we've got two different lines really of thunderstorms that we're tracking. There you can see the main one, and there's the second one back behind it. In addition to that, out here way in front, we've got prefrontal thunderstorms that are beginning to pop up. Those are not severe right now. Notice the hefty of stuff right there is working its way through Canada. Heads up if you know anybody traveling or that lives in Toronto, those storms are headed in that direction. And then back here on the second line is where we have been seeing some of the severe thunderstorms, and those are going to be closing in the airspace a little bit here into Detroit. Now, we also have a lot of action happening in Florida, and we've had a lot of heavy rain and some flooding here today, and now we have a brand new tornado warning that has just been issued here. This is just outside of Fort Myers. This is for Lee County until 7 o'clock Eastern time. So Doppler radar is indicating that we do have some rotation on this storm, and you need to be getting into your tornado safe place. Now, there's a lot of heavy rain associated with this. You might not be able to see the tornado right there where the red and the green come together to the west of Lehigh Acres. That's where we see that rotation. We'll continue to track this coming up next. Breaking right now, we are tracking some severe weather that has developed in southwest Florida, and we've got a tornado warning that has been issued here just outside of Fort Myers. There are a couple of clusters of storms here, and embedded within there, we are seeing some rotation that's getting pretty close to Lehigh Acres right now, and that warning is in effect until 7 o'clock. So Fort Myers is right over here. Notice the very intense rain and thunderstorms that's on top of you. That's not severe right now, but it is producing some very heavy downpours. It's right over in this area where we have the rotation that's taking place. So right in there where the red and the green are coming together to the west of Lehigh Acres. This is moving slowly in more of a southerly direction. So you can see that that developed right in there and has now worked its way just a little bit farther to the south, and definitely seen some rotation. It's a little bit on the broad side, I would say, but we're also pretty far away from the radar. So there could be some tighter rotation within this storm. Either way, it is producing very heavy rain. You're likely not to be able to see a tornado. I know we've got some good structure over here near Fort Myers where you can actually see a little shelf cloud right now, but you shouldn't be going out and looking at these storms. Trust the warning. Get to an interior room, say a closet or maybe a bathroom or maybe an enclosed hallway, as many walls as you can possibly get between you and the outside of your home, and make sure that you stay there until 7 o'clock when this warning expires. Now, we have a lot of storms across Florida. Most of them are not severe, and I think the biggest risk outside of these isolated severe storms are going to be some really heavy rain. That's what we've seen most commonly in Florida today. But up here, right along and just to the south of Interstate 10 is where we're also seeing some new severe thunderstorm warnings that have popped up for parts of Columbia, Hamilton, and Suwannee counties until 7:15. So this whole area in here, we are tracking for the risk of damaging winds. There may be some small hail with that, but I'm not seeing any big obvious signs that hail is coming out of it. We actually had some decent hail that came down in West Palm earlier this afternoon, and that also produced some damage, including some gusts that went up to 74 miles per hour, downing some trees. No injuries to report today in Florida, and the severe weather not expected to be very organized, so it's going to be isolated here and there. So know if you get a warning, you're going to need to take shelter right away. The rest of us are going to be seeing some heavy rain. If you live in typical poor drainage spots, also really be on alert for the chance of flooding. Want to hand it over to Chris and Chris right now. You guys are talking about this time of the year, right? Who would have said we'd be having, say, parts of California in a cone instead of Florida versus Texas or Louisiana? But the Gulf is not off limits at the moment.
No, it's not. And after the situation in California unfolds this weekend, we've got to keep a close watch in the Gulf of Mexico next week. Not before then. However, some of the rainfall chances will increase in Florida through the weekend, like we saw today. Then it has an opportunity to develop 30%. So it's up until, and as we go in time, this number is probably going to get a little higher.
Still in the low category at this
Still far away. Yeah.
Yeah, in time, it's and one of the disturbances that could help do that is still far away too.
Yeah.
So time and distance still a lot to learn with this, but what we do know for a fact is the water's hot, Chris.
It's hot.
I mean, 90 degrees. Wow.
And so that's why that area yellow, that's where the development would be most likely, where the water's hot and the atmospheric conditions are a little bit more conducive for development.
This is where it is right now.
That's what we got to get
disturbance. So once
into there.
this gets to this area, that's when at least there's a low chance at this point for development.
Yeah, so there maybe nothing happens and we just see an increase in rain chances, or we get something more organized like a tropical depression or tropical storm. That's a possibility. This is just showing you some of the spin, and nothing is super well defined. It's just kind of a little ripple. So an increased moisture coming into Florida as this weekend. Then after that, both the models picking up on a little bit more organization. So we'll start with Florida because we know the rain chances here are going to be going up.
And pockets of 3 to 5 inches, but this could be just where the clouds hang around a little bit longer. Maybe the rain lasts a little bit longer, as opposed to those pop-up thunderstorms that you're used to.
Yeah, where it starts sunny in the morning and then you get your clouds. But look at this.
It's showing something.
And look at that.
That's showing something.
Yeah, so, this is one model run. The consistency here, though, we've had a lot more consistency with this, something developing in the Gulf of Mexico. That was the European. Now this is GFS. And notice nothing as much over there. But again, similar area. And again, a little window, kind of that last leg in the Gulf of Mexico that it tries to make a ramp up.
And as you're baking in the heat next week, it's that heat or the heat dome that will keep most of the Gulf Coast generally protected from any tropical activity.
And there has been that shift a little bit south because the models a couple days ago were bringing it up along I-10. That's looking less and less likely. The rainfall certainly is something we'll watch. The European showing some substantial rainfall for coastal Texas and the Hill Country. And this actually could be a good thing because we need the rain in Texas. We're running behind, and it's been so hot, so this would help cool you down.
Right, it's always tricky getting a good thing with a tropical entity.
If it stays on the weak side. Thanks.
This is Storm Center. We are tracking Hurricane Hilary on verge of becoming a major hurricane. Currently, it is a Category 2 hurricane, could be up to a 3 this evening. The forecast does take it up to a Category 4 hurricane as it is going to be just west of Cabo San Lucas. 130-mile-per-hour winds expected by Saturday afternoon. That would be in the center of the storm. Still some strong gusty winds outside of it. Heavy rain heading for California. Tropical threat on the West Coast is extremely rare. In fact, this is the first time Los Angeles has been in the forecast cone. And that's since the Hurricane Center started using the cone in 2002. For some insight on that and what's behind this rare tropical threat, let's go to storm specialist Carl Parker. Carl?
It is not a common occurrence to get a tropical cyclone in Southern California, and that has everything to do with what's going on with ocean temperatures off of California. This time of the year, water temperatures are in the 60s, not nearly warm enough to maintain a tropical cyclone with that colder water coming down along the coast. However, it's much, much warmer farther south along the west coast of Mexico. So if you get a really strong storm that comes up along the west coast of Mexico and then is pulled northward, it can very easily be that even though it's weakening, it's still strong enough to produce wind and heavy rain. But again, it's not a common occurrence. And in fact, the only time that we have seen hurricane force winds in Southern California in recorded history is going back 165 years, 1858, when a hurricane was just offshore relative to San Diego, and it did cause a fair amount of wind damage. Now, what's amazing about this is that at the time there were only about 43 300 people in San Diego County. And in fact, when you look at a photograph of downtown Los Angeles from 11 years later, 1869, look at that. That is downtown Los Angeles. And obviously things have changed dramatically. It is one of the largest metro areas in the country. About 20 million people live there. So if we saw a similar storm today, it would likely cause hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Now, the thing that has us worried going forward is that water temperatures are getting warmer every year, which means it's more possible for storms to stay strong as they move up and along the coast. And so we may see more of a threat from heavy rain and even some wind coming into Southern California in coming years. Back to you.
All right, so today is Thursday, right? Impacts start working their way in late tomorrow, maybe Saturday, Sunday, Monday look to be the big go days in terms of the biggest of the impacts. So now's the time. Hopefully we're already tropical ready, but that's not something we do every day. But there are a lot of similarities. I was thinking about when you have to evacuate for wildfires, or if you have a big flood threat, or if you're downstream, not stream, but down flow, I guess,
down
of the burn scar areas. Those are things Californians have had to deal with before. But it's not just California, guys.
It's important to be aware of your surroundings, kind of know what's going on. I think the most important thing is to pay attention to the forecast. And if you get some, notice from officials, do what they say.
Yeah, and the things are going to happen so quickly once it starts. It's crazy how fast things can change and escalate in a hurry when you're talking about a tropical rain. But there's Hurricane Hilary right now. We will get an advisory here in about an hour. And so it very well could be a major hurricane by that point. Certainly looks like it from the satellite, getting stronger. 110 miles per hour right now, Category 2, with that pressure down to 960 millibars.
Yeah, conditions are going to start going downhill in places like Cabo already later on tonight or into tomorrow. I can see storms nearby.
Some cruise ships, there's reports that they're leaving earlier to get back to port because it's already getting choppy on the waters.
I'm sure, yeah, and that's going to work its way up the coast too, right? So all the way up California could see some of those impacts. Here's a look at how much this thing has been intensifying in the last 24 hours. We went from a measly tropical storm to nearly a Cat 3 hurricane. We're just 1 mile an hour away from that, guys.
When we walked out of here yesterday at 8 o'clock, 40 mile per hour.
Well, we were like, man, only 40 miles per hour? Because it was already getting
look good. Well, these are satellite episodes.
But the next one went up to 50.
I know.
Right now, 110, and it could be a Cat 3 possibly by the time we walk out of here tonight.
I mean, it might be right now, quite honestly, right? We're doing these satellite estimates. Hurricane hunters are scheduled to fly into this tomorrow.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll get some more information and more data. That'll go into the models. Our confidence will begin to grow on where it's going, because it's an interesting setup, isn't it? This is going to be drawn up towards the north. A lot of times we see these things fizzle out, or they'll get caught up in that. Oh, my telestrator's not on there, but it'll get caught up more towards the Four Corners, right? So this is a different situation heading right into California.
A lot of impacts, but rain and flash flooding are going to be the biggest threat.
More than 36 million people inside this cone because of an impressive hurricane as it heads toward San Diego and Los Angeles and areas north of there. Even millions more outside of the cone still need to pay attention, and that includes Las Vegas.
Yeah, even Reno. We're going to get heavy rain getting well into California, the Great Basin, the Northern Rockies. A lot to dissect with this storm.
That's right, and this is Storm Center. I'm meteorologist Chris Warren.
And I'm meteorologist Chris Pruin. We've got a look at Hurricane Hilary right now on its way as a strengthening hurricane. Right now, Category 2 and getting stronger. Look at those deep purples really starting to wrap around the entire eye.
All right, so let's say you haven't watched anything since Monday, right? And you tune into us and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, you're like, where in the Atlantic is this?
But it's heading up in the direction of Los Angeles.
It's not in the Atlantic. It's in the East Pacific, impacting parts of Mexico in the next couple of days, and California, as well as the desert Southwest.
And here on Storm Center, still getting in more images from the disastrous wildfire in Hawaii. Yes, people are coping the best they can, and a lot of times it's just by helping each other.
And we've got some rain that will be headed to Hawaii, hopefully manageable and helpful with the drought and getting those spot fires put out. But let's start with storms forming in the Ohio River Valley. We've also seen it across parts of the Four Corners too, some big cities, and in Florida too, Jackie. It's been an active night in some select cities.
It has. I want to start out though by telling you that that tornado warning that was in effect for Lee County has been allowed to expire. So notice on our breaking weather alert system, none of the red being reported or shown there. We do have some warnings right now in Indiana. We've got some flash flooding that's been underway into parts of Utah, and yes, Florida has been active as well. So let's show you the radar. We've had a lot of heavy rain, more than anything else in Florida. No more tornado warning for you in Lee County there. Fort Myers still looking at a lot of lightning and these heavy downpours, so use a lot of caution if you actually absolutely have to travel. Right along Interstate 75 is going to be slow going for you. We could get some ponding of water on the roadways here, and this clustering of thunderstorms, notice it's really not moving a whole heck of a lot, so that's going to be a concern. We've got a live look for you here real quick in Fort Myers just to give you a better idea of what conditions are like, and there you can see the rain that's coming down. You got the road spray at least that's coming off the back of the vehicles there, kind of the rooster tail, if you will, and then off into the distance you can see a heavier rain shaft back there. So this is kind of a clustering of thunderstorms, and we've got another view of it where you can see visibility is even worse, right? We've got the raindrops on the camera. It looks hazier, foggier. Good to see all the lights though on. Always remember, when you've got to have your windshield wipers on, you should have your headlights on. Let's take you to North Florida right now, because this is another area where we've got some severe weather. This is just outside of Lake City and right along Interstate 75. Columbia, Hamilton, and Suwannee counties under a severe thunderstorm warning, including White Springs, until 7:15 right there. So we could get some damaging winds around 60 miles per hour. Not really much, though, I don't think, in terms of hail with that storm, but there has been some hail today in parts of Florida. Now, hail could be an issue up here in parts of the Ohio Valley, but it's mostly damaging winds that we're concerned about. Hail could be up to a quarter in diameter here near Eatonton, and this is for Blackford and Grant counties until 7:30. So there you can see that storm was likely producing some hail. Looks like the core might have dropped out a little bit with that, but still some damaging winds and maybe some smaller hail can be expected with it. So stay indoors until that passes. Most of the warnings will be kind of few and far between, but it's not impossible to have severe weather today. We're getting a few warnings here and there, and I think overall our couple of lines of severe weather kind of turns into one big one overnight as this tracks off towards the east. And look at the potential for some big time travel issues in the morning here tomorrow. If you're an early commuter, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, you may have trouble here in places like Burlington, over towards Albany, even into New York City. So check on conditions before you leave the house early tomorrow. All right, we want to switch gears, go back to our top story, and that is Hurricane Hilary, which has been rapidly intensifying and turning into a very powerful storm right now. In fact, almost a major hurricane, if not a major hurricane, because we're just guessing based on satellite data. I mean, a little more than a guess. I don't mean a guess, you know what I mean? But we are starting to get additional alerts, guys, that are getting issued now for flooding. That includes Los Angeles, places that typically don't deal with tropical weather.
And rain this time of the year. You know, we get our wet season in the wintertime and early in the spring, and we're in the, fire season. So it's good to get the rain, but we're going to get a lot in a short period of time. This is a truly tropical system that's coming into a very arid part of the country.
Yeah, we're looking at the cone there, and the cone's for wind, right? Or it's for the track, but along the track it shows the wind. But it's the rain that, if you're in Reno or eventually, northern Nevada and even Oregon and Idaho, it could get to you in one form or another. So a thunderstorm might be a little bit stronger than expected, but there could be significant impact, significant problems in Southern California and the deserts.
You know what? Can I just kind of pull an audible?
Yeah,
can we go back to the track? Because I want to talk a little bit about those impacts. So Chris made a really good point right there, saying that this is the estimated track. Could be anywhere within this cone. So look at the impacts that could happen if we're on the far left side of that cone. Los Angeles is to the right of it. Fresno is to the right of it. Reno's to the right of it. But what happens if we take that righter track and this goes on up into Nevada? right?
Las Vegas.
That's a very, very different impact in terms of your rain amounts and your wind conditions, onshore flow versus offshore flow in a lot of these areas. So while it looks like a narrow corridor, impacts could be very different. So you really need to stay tuned with us over the next couple of days to help keep you abreast of any changes and fine-tuning this forecast.
Here's the tricky thing also about the cone is that this is for, the center of the cone goes somewhere in there most of the time, and then a third of the time it goes outside of there. So you can think of it kind of like draw an imaginary line anywhere within the cone, and think of a big truck going down the road. But the line is the center line, right? So not all the impacts of that truck it's going to stay on the line. It's outside of that line. So you better not be anywhere near that line if you're in the middle of the road and a big truck's heading your way.
So Las Vegas is under a flood watch. Flagstaff is under a flood watch. But you look at this map, you would think, oh, maybe I don't have anything to worry about in Flagstaff.
The
That's
other
not
thing
the
that
case.
complicates this is there's topography here. So it makes, this isn't like an East Coast system where you have that, and if you're on the right side, you're going to get a lot more rain. Here, you're going to get massive impacts if you get downsloping on winds or upslope, where you're squeezing out that moisture.
And I want to go back to what Jackie was saying about Las Vegas. Imagine the line, the center of the storm going straight up the middle. Las Vegas would have worse weather most likely than Bakersfield.
And Los Angeles.
And the center would be just to the right.
All right, let's dig into some of these details of what's happening with it right now and where this is going.
I think what we're all just saying there is that it's complicated.
Complicated for your forecast specifically.
Yes, for your specific forecast. And there's a lot going on. Right now, this is a lot going on. Hurricane Hilary, 110 mile per hour, category 2. And we're saying that we think it's probably major, but that's not our call yet. We'll see what the National Hurricane Center says at the top of the hour, maybe a little bit before. Tropical storm warnings here for Baja, and this is why tropical storm conditions expected. Would not be surprised if those get changed to hurricane watches or eventually warnings based on this, depending on the track as well. If it goes far away from Cabo, maybe it stays as tropical storm, but if it goes on this side, maybe possible to get hurricane conditions here, because by the time that Hilary is due west of Cabo, the forecast has it as a category 4 hurricane. The GFS forecast model, so one computer's depiction of what's going to happen here. Tight lines, essentially the wind. It's a change in pressure with distance, lower pressure, higher pressure out here. You can think of it like a big pit, big hole here, big hole in the ground, or a very low area of low pressure. And this goes up, it gets like even deeper. So very similar to like a hole in the ground, like a topographical map here going down. So this is a very tightly wound system, very strong winds, GFS. European, same story. This is Saturday. Some light rain to moderate rain getting into California, getting hammered by rain in Baja and the mainland there in Mexico. And then the GFS takes it up right up to the Channel Islands, right across Catalina, the center of it, but all the heavy rain over here. That's the GFS. The European, different story. Very heavy rain, but wind not as much of a thing, and a different track. In fact, it's hard to even tell exactly where the center would be. Bottom line, there's a lot to figure out when the storm gets up here. Is it going to be here? Is it going to be here? Is it going to be strong? Is it going to be weaker? That still remains to be seen. But both of the forecast models that we just looked at absolutely showing big-time rain event.
All right, let's talk a little bit about why that track might be one way or another, because we've got a couple of different factors that are pulling it northward. So often in the eastern Pacific crest, we see these things continue to go westward, or maybe they'll get curved up around an area of high pressure and go up towards the four quarters and really dissipate. This is different.
This is different. And we had Kay last year, which was threatening towards California, but then it curved back out to sea. So this is not going to happen. And unlike the specifics for your location are still yet to be determined because of any shifts towards the left or right of the cone, we know there's going to be impacts in California and the Southwest. It's going that way. The confidence is all there. We have the ingredients needed, not just for the strengthening storm, because the strength not necessarily as important for impacts down the line. The stronger it gets, though, it's got to wind that down. It takes a little bit longer to do that, the stronger the storm is. And right now, we have very little wind shear to inhibit that growth. So there is the potential It could even get stronger than Category 4 before it starts to weaken. And then it cools off, the waters cool off, and we see big weakening there. And then the ridge of high pressure, which is keeping much of the middle of the country quiet and hot, that's there. We know that. So that's what's pulling this to the north. And then you've got this little cutoff low that's going to come through, swoop it up, which is why it's such a fast system. And even for moving as fast as it is, the amount of rainfall it's still able to put down in such a short period of time in a desert or Mediterranean type climate is notable. And that's why the impacts there are so concerning. So the confidence of an impact for California, Nevada, and the desert Southwest is there. This is the direction it's headed. There's confidence there. Now, does it stay further offshore towards coastal California, or does it move into Baja California and move in towards the southeastern part of the state into Nevada? Those details still have yet to be worked out, but the difference is about 100 miles or so. We know it's headed in this direction, and there will be big impacts here to the U.S., especially in Southern California, the Great Basin, and even as it goes up into the Northern Rockies. It's quick, but wind energy can be a factor, and heavy rain that could lead to mudslides and flash flooding.
Yeah, and this thing, as it becomes post-tropical, the wind field sometimes can expand a little bit too, so we'll have to watch that for the Pac Northwest. The flood threat is what I really want to focus in on right now, because that's going to be probably the #1 most common widespread concern overall for Hilary into the southwestern U.S. New watches have just been posted within the last half an hour here, and notice now Los Angeles is in on the flood alerts. San Diego, Palm Springs, up towards Las Vegas. Now this goes even farther north into Nevada, Cedar City, southwestern parts of Utah, and much of western Arizona. Phoenix not in it, but Flagstaff is, at least for now. So this is going to get enhanced. We'll have monsoon rain and thunderstorms here in the southwest, and then we're going to get a big interjection of that moisture coming in here with Hilary. Now, where the heaviest of rain is going to fall, still TBD, depending on that exact track. So notice the Euro is really trying to paint that just to the east of where the center comes on shore with the current forecast east of San Diego, and then working its way on up into southern parts of Nevada. But the GFS wants to bring the center a little farther over here, so it brings the impacts of the heaviest rain a little bit closer towards the coastal areas. But either way you slice it, the potential is there, and the models are putting out a half of a foot of rainfall, maybe a little bit more in isolated spots. We will have enhancement of some of that rain because of terrain. Moisture will be coming in from the tropical Pacific. That's going to get fed up the Gulf of California here. But we also have that big high that's getting pushed into the central part of the United States. So we're going to get flow coming in this way. We're going to get flow coming in this way. So we'll have a Gulf influence and a Pacific influence that will just funnel and channel that moisture all across this region. So this will be high concentrations. The amount of available moisture could put us over the top in terms of what you would typically get in an entire year of rainfall in places like Palm Springs. That's a possibility. I mean, you look at the month of August alone for Los Angeles, our average rainfall is this. It's 0. So we could get more than a month's worth in just a couple of days. Flood risk is beginning to increase, already going up a little bit here on Saturday, but Sunday into Monday, that's likely when the big show begins to happen. So I would not plan on traveling if I lived in this part of the country, certainly starting on Sunday morning, if not before that, guys.
And turning now to our other top story, the aftermath of the deadly wildfires in Hawaii. This is what Lahaina Harbor looked like. And just days ago, last week, we are seeing the widespread destruction the fires left behind. Right now, I want to go to meteorologist Reynolds Wolf, who joins us live from Maui. Hello, Reynolds.
Hello, Chris. I got to tell you, our present location, roughly about 9 miles south of Lahaina at this point. You got the Pacific Ocean just to my immediate, well, to my west. And I can tell you there is assistance coming from all over the conference, all converging in Lahaina. In Lahaina. A lot of help today given to people who desperately need it. We're going to talk more about the assistance they're receiving and that they truly appreciate coming up in a few moments. But first, let me step out of the way. Great shot that we have on what is a beautiful day as help arrives.
Responding to a hurricane is way more unpredictable. The divers can get trapped underwater. It's a significant challenge.
When everybody's running for the exit, those are the guys, the firefighters of the marine world.
All of a sudden, we see that the boat is leaning to one side.
If it collapses at that moment, could be deadly. It's a very high risk and very high reward. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
We're going to win. We never lose.
Deepwater Salvage. All new episodes. Sunday nights, 8/7 Central. Only on the Weather Channel.
This is Storm Center and eyes on Hurricane Hilary and the expected impacts that are possible for Southern California and parts of the desert Southwest. Here's a look at the cone, and not expected to remain a hurricane as it approaches the Golden State, but nonetheless, the potential is there for some serious impacts in terms of flooding, possibly some strong gusty winds as well. So, of course, that's one of our big stories we are following for you here on Storm Center.
And turning our attention now to the deadly wildfires in Hawaii, signs of recovery are emerging with public schools across Maui reopening, as well as traffic into Lahaina. Governor Josh Green is vowing to prevent land grabs during this time. He's announcing details on a moratorium by tomorrow. Since flames consumed much of Lahaina just over a week ago, locals have feared that a rebuilt town.
The number of those missing or unaccounted for is around 1,000. There's limited access to burned areas due to chemicals and toxins. 45% of burned areas have been searched so far. FEMA has sent more than 190 search and rescue team members. They also have 492 employees deployed to assist Hawaii residents. We want to check back with meteorologist Reynolds Wolf, who did make his way to Maui. And Reynolds, we are looking right now again at a beautiful residents. We want to check back with meteorologist Reynolds Wolf, who did make his way to Maui. And Reynolds, we are looking right now again at a beautiful day there, but still such a horrific aftermath that so many are dealing with right now.
Oh, you're so right about that, Chris. I heard you mention that schools are back in session. You know, it's part of anything they can do to restore a sense of normalcy to a town that has been dealt with such a nightmare situation. I can tell you that trying to get through town can be exceedingly difficult because of the number of roadblocks, because of the number of checkpoints you have to go through. They've got law enforcement out. They're doing everything they can to protect the area. National Guard has also been activated. They're doing their jobs. We are actually well south of Lahaina. Our location is roughly 8 to 9 miles south. The reason why we are here is because it has been exceedingly difficult to get signals out because of, well, you've got a lot of cellular traffic, as you might imagine, everyone trying to communicate at the same time. People are advised that if you're going to communicate in the city of Lahaina, usually one of the best ways to do so is by text, because just your common phone call can be a very, very difficult endeavor. And I can only imagine the frustration that many people are feeling trying to get in touch with some loved ones that they have not heard from in a while. And as you mentioned, Chris, the number exceeds 1,000 people missing. So very, very difficult. Getting from one part of town to another. We mentioned the choke points, but just the traffic of people, just the confluence of people coming in, trying to get help, but also people trying to get some form of assistance. And it is to be had there. I can tell you that there's one place in downtown Lahaina that has been untouched by fire. The businesses are closed. However, it is a hotbed of activity with all kinds of goods and services available. Mental health, you can get a hot meal, you can get food for your pet, you can get first aid, you get medication, you can get just about anything. But oftentimes people want to just make contact with each other and just hear the words, "It is going to be okay. It's going to be all right." And I will tell you that when we got here yesterday, that's when our crew arrived. Producer Michelle Birnbaum and I drove over, actually flew over, of course, from Los Angeles. As we flew over, the plane was packed with other first responders, Chris, from Riverside, California. But there are people from all over the United States that have converged on this point to do what they can to help other people. Let's send it back to you.
All right, Reynolds, so you say it's tough being able to get around. What have you seen? How close have you been able to get to Lahaina, and what was your first reaction?
First reaction is that it does look like a moonscape in a sense. I mean, we've all seen the old images of astronauts walking on a lunar landscape and where the powder kicks up. Well, you have much of the vegetation that has been reduced to ash. You'll see a few trees here or there, but what's really compelling is the stuff that is gone, like brick, like masonry, vaporized in extreme heat. Brick breaks down, and so does mortar when you get in excess of, say, 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, and that has happened in many locations. You have near the shell of cars that have been burned out, almost this liquefied, really running from the tires and just spilling out, and that is your aluminum. Aluminum melts at 1,221 degrees Fahrenheit, so it gives you a sense of how hot things were. But Chris, more than what we've seen, we've heard a lot of stories from people. Back to you.
All right, Reynolds, that's our Reynolds reporting live for us. Appreciate it so much. And you think about things that bricks that have, seem like they've just vaporized. It's going to be tough to get all those supplies back in and do the rebuild process, much more so than if you would do that in the lower 48. Welcome back to Storm Center. We are continuing to track Hurricane Hilary, which is a very powerful Category 2 storm, almost a major hurricane. We're off by 1 mile per hour. We will get a new advisory coming in here by the top of the hour. When that comes in, we will bring that to you. The forecast is bringing this up Baja California, or very near it, and on up into the southwestern United States. Big cities, places like Los Angeles, San Diego, into Reno are in that cone of uncertainty. So I want to bring in meteorologist Chris Warren and Chris Bruin, talk more about some of these impacts we can get. And the forecast track of this really could be damaging in many areas, especially when it comes to flooding.
Yes, let's get a look at Hurricane Hilary right now as it's in its strengthening phase. It's, just originated a little early yesterday. And now we've got on the borderline of major hurricane. Category 2. Look at it here from the visible satellite. That is the eye of Hilary. And look at the cloud tops. They're continuing to shoot up, meaning explosive growth.
Tropical storm yesterday, 24 hours later. I mean, that's like a sleep and a half. I mean, you take a long nap and boom, there's a hurricane, a strong hurricane. And it's expected to get even stronger. Also, look at how big it is.
It's huge.
So this is the main business part of it.
Yep.
And outside of it, though, is a lot of moisture. So eventually, a lot of this, even if the winds aren't strong with it, this is what potentially could get into the mountains, get extra rain out of this. Lot of tropical moisture heading north, heading to the west coast.
There was a blow-up of thunderstorms, too, well hundreds of miles away from, the core of Hilary, and it's all associated with that tropical moisture. So there's the track, and I mean that if you were to overlay the the cloud field and the moisture source, I mean you're going to see impacts all the way. There will be a sharp cutoff, drastic line on where the edge of the heavier rain is and where we don't get much at all, but it's going to be well outside the cone.
I mean, wherever the center is, it can span a couple to few or even several hundred miles across. I mean, that's the potential with this thing.
And then, I mean, goodness, so many places are going to see impacts here. The details still got to work out for your specific neighborhood, but if you live in California, if you have travel plans to California, parts of Arizona and Nevada, you need to monitor the forecast closely this weekend.
So the GFS and the European in pretty decent agreement until late Saturday, right? Strong storm, strong hurricane still.
Yeah.
Due west of Cabo, just about due west. A lot of rain with it, a lot of wind, but then there's some divergence in the model. So a little bit of different path with these. This path, the GFS, takes it right up to LA.
Yeah, so possible landfall in California, and this would be kind of the worst situation for San Diego, Los Angeles. With heavy rainfall, you would have upslope on the mountains, so you would get heavy rain in the San Bernardino Mountains and over towards Ventura County, and then maybe not as much out towards some of the desert areas.
You said the word landfall. So at that point, the center could be a tropical depression, possibly a tropical storm, or
much
remnants of much weaker. But the rain is going to be a big issue, even if it takes a weaker route, a wind weak route, still strong rain threat.
Yeah, European wants to, and that's what we're showing right here. So European shows much weaker storm, right? It's also much quicker moving, but moves in, say, into Baja California and moves up the spine of the mountains. So
the
rainfall regardless.
They're not too different.
No, heavy rain. The confidence is growing for that rain threat.
All right, we are seeing some rain right now across the contiguous 48 or the lower 48 or the mainland, whatever you want to call it. We're focusing on what's happening right now where the showers and storms are. Jackie, that's what you've been doing all evening.
Yeah, sure have. A lot of the rain action today, some of it's been into the west, especially into Utah, where we've had some flash flood warnings, but we've also had a lot going on in the state of Florida and then into the Great Lakes region as we're tracking a storm system up there. Want to start out in Florida right now because you folks have been getting a lot of heavy rain. Heavy downpours leading to very slow moving storms could provide a little bit of flooding across this area. We've had a couple of flood alerts, no big warnings this afternoon or evening, but it's a trend that we're keeping our eye on as storms are slow going. Now up here across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, there may be a few severe thunderstorms. We've had a few warnings here or there, primarily back into Indiana. Those have been allowed to expire, but look at this solid line here from Cleveland stretching all the way up to the north shore of Lake Huron. This is going to be plowing through Toronto a little bit later on. We do have some thunderstorms working their way into the Detroit metro area right now. Sub-severe, but there's lightning and heavy rain, so make sure you stay indoors there. Columbus, you're about to get some heavier rain. Mansfield up towards Cleveland, it's just lighter rain for you at the moment, and this all works its way towards Pittsburgh, say Albany, even New York City by the morning.
Well, welcome back into Storm Center. We're closely monitoring the latest here, tracking Hurricane Hilary as it continues to push up through the eastern Pacific off the coast of Mexico, strengthening as it has a lot of warm water right now. Notice, though, as we get into Saturday, it starts to push farther north and we start to see weakening because the water temperatures cool off drastically. So that will certainly weaken it, even though if you hear a Category 4 hurricane, note that that's Hilary, but it won't stay that way. Impacts, though, are going to be detrimental to some parts of California, Nevada, possibly the desert Southwest and north of there as we go into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday of next week. Jackie?
All right, thanks, Chris. We want to get back to Hawaii and check in with our meteorologist, Reynolds Wolf. He is in Maui right now, but has been unable to get communication very well close to the fire scar area. Reynolds, what's the latest where you are and how are conditions?
The latest that where we are right now is it's still a work in progress. It's understandable when you consider the tragedy that has befallen this American community that is, again, so many of us have a connection with our hearts and our souls. But I can tell you it is just one step it's a slow progress, but each day gets a little bit better and a little bit better. And some of it comes in the form of just people from all over the United States that are converging on these points to help out best that they possibly can. Now, at our vantage point, Lahaina is right up the coastline, some about 8 or 9 miles. The reason why we're at this location is because you've got so many people that are in Lahaina at this hour. It's very hard to use, very difficult to use cell coverage at this time. Cell coverage is very sparse for the time being, but we expect that to improve also going forward in time. You know, when you think about the Hawaiian Islands, there are a lot of them, 132 in fact, but there are 9 that we tend to know best. Well, obviously Maui is one of them, but not all the islands are exactly the same. They're very much like people in that they all have different personalities, characteristics, so to speak. And I will tell you that this island, Maui, is very different from others. Say, for example, Kauai. Kauai is a very damp island. It's where you have a lot of rainforest. You've got Waimea Canyon, the Nepali coastline. Intense rainfall. This is an area that tends to be a bit drier. However, the drought we've had here has been just exceptional in a very, very bad way, obviously. We expect the fortunes to change in a tremendous way, potentially, over the next several days and through the weekend as more rain is forecast to move through. We truly do need, again, more of the moisture in this part of the world, but even that is not going to be the perfect remedy for this situation. The people that are here, I can tell you, are very, very frustrated in a sense. We spoke with a great lady earlier today. Her name is Monique. She has lived in the Lahaina area for about 34 years. She's originally from France, and she was at a point where she was up on a hillside at a checkpoint, and she was not allowed to go down to her home because they are still searching through a lot of the areas that are no more at this point. And although she could not see her house, she could see the structure right next to it. And she is led to believe that her home is gone at this point. And so there's a lot of sadness, a lot of frustration of not what people know, but what they don't know. And there are a lot of unknowns for her. So it's certainly some very, very difficult times, no doubt. But that is the situation. Each day gets a little better for some people, but still remember, in terms of the death toll, it's about 111. The area that has been searched is about 40%, so they still have a ways to go, and there's tremendous fear that there will be, we'll learn about more loss of life. But this was something that, again, struck during the early morning hours. You've seen the video. You know the harrowing tales that people did, trying to do the best they could to avoid the flames. And again, so many people with broken hearts. We have got right behind us, you may be able to hear every now and then a car racing by. That is Highway 30. Highway 30 basically goes right up the west coast of Maui, and it has been a conduit that's been incredibly busy for much of the day. You'll have people that are bringing in a variety of supplies. You also have a lot of people that are very curious. It happens to be their home, but again, they're messed with the frustration that I told you about in the case of Monique, not being able to see the condition of what they call home. So it's very difficult. Right now, you'll also notice that with the islands off in the distance, the water is actually quite sedate. Very important, because many of the supplies do not arrive by air, but they go from boat, from island to island. And they have a process of when you take those boats, you take those supplies, they go into dock, they have to be loaded on cars, on trucks, then they're taken to many places. We've seen many of them not just in Lahaina, but also a bit more to the north, some locations a bit more to the south, and people are distributing these supplies. And it's a little bit of everything. It goes from, well, you'll have areas where people can get supplies for, well, the baby. You can have diapers, you can have formula, you can have food for yourself, food for your cat, advice. Insurance companies are setting up. So it really is like small cities that are popping up in places, spots that, well, again, were unscathed from the flames. And that's also an interesting aspect that you'll find here, is places that have just been laid to waste by the incredible inferno that came through. But then you'll go, say, a half mile in one direction or the other, and it's as though it has always been. But this is a place that has been changed in a tremendous way, and a lot of heavy hearts. And if you happen to be the praying side, please pray for people here. And if you want to send good vibes, do that. They'll accept both. Okay, leaving you with a great shot that we have here. Sun high over Maui.
Breaking right now, new information from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Hilary now a Category 3 hurricane. That is a major hurricane. It's up now 10 miles an hour. It is now 120 mile per hour, Category 3 major hurricane Hilary. It is moving to the west-northwest, still at 14 miles an hour, still on a path that takes it up to the west coast of the United States. Along the way, Baja. And by Saturday afternoon, 130 mile per hour winds would make it a Category 4. Wow, 140 is the forecast, just seeing this now, for tomorrow afternoon. So a Category 4 by tomorrow afternoon is now the forecast. Again, it is a Category 3 right now, a major hurricane. And as a reminder, it only goes up to Category 5. And tomorrow the forecast does have it at a Category 4 hurricane. And a tropical threat on the West Coast is extremely rare, seeing a cone like that. In fact, this is the first time Los Angeles has been in the forecast cone since the Hurricane Center started using the cone in 2002. For some insight on that and what's behind this rare tropical threat, let's go to storm specialist Carl Parker.
It is not a common occurrence to get a tropical cyclone in Southern California, and that has everything to do with what's going on with ocean temperatures off of California. This time of the year, water temperatures are in the 60s, not nearly warm enough to maintain a tropical cyclone with that colder water coming down along the coast. However, it's much, much warmer farther south along the west coast of Mexico. So if you get a really strong storm that comes up along the west coast of Mexico and then is pulled northward, it can very easily be that even though it's weakening, it's still strong enough to produce wind and heavy rain. But again, it's not a common occurrence. And in fact, the only time that we have seen hurricane force winds in Southern California in recorded history is going back 165 years, 1858, when a hurricane was just offshore relative to San Diego, and it did cause a fair amount of wind damage. Now, what's amazing about this is that at the time there were only about 4,300 people in San Diego County. And in fact, when you look at a photograph of downtown Los Angeles from 11 years later, 1869, look at that. That is downtown Los Angeles. And obviously things have changed dramatically. It is one of the largest metro areas in the country. About 20 million people live there. So if we saw a similar storm today, it would likely cause hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Now, the thing that has us worried going forward is that water temperatures are getting warmer every year, which means it's more possible for storms to stay strong as they move up and along the coast. And so we may see more of a threat from heavy rain and even some wind coming into Southern California in coming years. Back to you.
All right, Carl, thanks so much. I want to talk a little bit more about what we can expect going forward with Hilary. If you just missed it before Carl's presentation there, Hilary is now a major hurricane. So that's a Cat 3. Winds 120 miles per hour. This is a powerful beast of a storm, and it's really big, guys, too. And that has far-reaching impacts we can expect.
You know, the stronger this gets, it takes time for it to slow down. It will slow down. But again, this is speeding up in intensity more quickly than the forecast was calling for yesterday.
It's happened fast.
Right, and on that point, Chris, sometimes I tried, it's not the best analogy, but you think about the warm waters into the cold waters. You think about the bike on the pathway along the beach going off into the sand, it slows you down. Yeah. Right? So that would be like, a tropical storm. Now let's take a truck or a golf cart on the same path going off into the beach, right, from concrete to that. It slows down, but it's going to go farther.
It's going to go farther.
A little bit more momentum, a little bit, more of a more force going forward. And there you go. Well, quickly that went from hopefully that was just
from
the graphic.
From a 3 to a 2. Yeah, I mean, it's still over Baja California. It's got it just offshore, right? But what's steering this thing and why this is pulling on up towards the north has to do with an upper low that's offshore right now, and also that heat dome from the central U.S. that's going to be shifting eastward, and that draws it farther north.
Look at the contrast. One side of Baja California to the other.
Yeah, the Gulf of California.
California is pretty warm.
It's shallow,
How
too.
hot is that?
Yeah, hot.
But with cooler water further north, that will help to ensure some of that weakening, but the moisture content is going to be there. We could be talking about 1/2 foot of rainfall or more in some of these areas.
In areas that only get 2 to 5 inches of rain for the year. It's huge.
Yeah, we also don't want to forget about the Gulf. We got a shot here. There's actually a little disturbance over near the Caribbean that will be pulling in through here the next couple of days. Welcome back to Storm Center. Before we let you go tonight, we want to update you one more time on the radar and the forecast. Still have some pretty widespread showers and thunderstorms going on across the Florida Peninsula. These storms are producing some really heavy rainfall. We're especially seeing that on the southwestern coast at the moment. Now, we're also tracking a storm system that's working across the Great Lakes, and this is heading into the northeast. We have a couple of spotty showers and thunder showers out ahead of the main line, but this is going to be the one to track, and then a little development back behind behind it. These storms just went through Detroit. We've got wet weather moving through Cleveland. Not severe, but notice the lightning beginning to build, especially farther south over towards Akron. Now, Columbus, Ohio, getting ready to get hit with showers and thunderstorms at the moment. And this is all going to be continuing to track off towards the east. Damaging wind, the most likely form of severe weather, maybe some marginally severe hail. But these storms will continue overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, and could be a rough early commute for folks along I-95, including places like New York City, heavier rain up towards Albany, even into Burlington, Vermont. And of course, we just got a new update in on Hurricane Hilary. It is now a major hurricane in the eastern Pacific, maximum winds of 120 miles per hour. It's going to be heading on up towards Baja California, places like San Diego, Los Angeles, Reno, even Bend, Oregon, all in the cone.